Okay, so learning target 6.4, solving radical equations. So we're just going to be solving for x here, okay? I'm going to do a bunch of examples with you. Alright, so we'll start off really simple here. The square root of 3x plus 10 equals 8. Okay? The square root of 3x plus 10 equals 8. You're trying to solve this equation right here for x. The problem is x is inside a square root symbol. Okay? You can't do anything with it when it's inside that square root symbol. Okay? You can't do anything with the 10 either. It's not like you can subtract 10 from both sides, because it's not really a 10. That's underneath the square root. The 3x plus 10 is a quantity that needs to be square rooted in order for it to equal 8. Okay? So really, you want to get rid of those radical symbols. You don't want them there. What could you do to both sides to get rid of a square root? Square both sides, because the opposite of a square root, or the inverse of a square root, would be to square both sides. By squaring a square root of something, you just get rid of the square root, and now all you have is 3x plus 10. When you square a square root, when you take the square root of something times itself, you essentially cancel out the radical symbol, the square root part of it. Okay? And all you have left is that, whatever was being square rooted. You square the 8 and you get 64, and now look, you have a very simple algebraic linear equation that you know how to solve. Subtract 10 from both sides, divide by 3, and you get x equals 18. Double check to make sure you're right, plug it back into the original. 3 times 18 is 54, plus 10 is 64, and the square root of 64 equals 8, so you got it right. Okay? About as simple as you can get. Alright, but you kind of understand the idea and the process a little bit. Okay? Anybody need more time on that one? Alright, I'm going to kind of keep building on this and get more and more difficult as I go here. Okay? I don't need to erase anything here. Okay, here's the next one. Negative 4 times the square root of x minus 6 equals negative 20. This one is different. You would not want to square both sides right away here. Because if you square both sides, you have to square that entire quantity. You'd have to take this entire side times itself, and that would get a little bit annoying, and you have to FOIL, all right? So you really do not want to do that. My suggestion would be to maybe do what first? Add 6, and then, not yet, divide by negative 4. Get the radical part, the square root part, get that by itself first, before you go to square both sides. Okay? So I'd add 6 to both sides. That would give you this. Then I would divide by negative 4. And that is, I believe, 3.5, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, or 7/2, however you prefer. Now I have the radical by itself. I just have the square root of something is equal to a number. Now what should we do? Square both sides, okay, to get rid of the square root. When I square the square root of x, I just get x, and when I square 3.5, I get 12.25. So the first problem I gave you, the square root was already by itself, so you just square both sides, gets rid of the square root. Second problem I gave you, the square root part was not by itself, so you had to get it by itself before you square both sides. Both fairly similar. Okay? This is a square root, so I square both sides. What if it was a cube root? I raise both sides to the third power, or I cube both sides. What about a sixth root? Raise both sides to the sixth power. That's how you undo each type of radical there. Okay? All right. Do another one here. -5 cube roots of 8x plus 12 equals -8. Very similar to the last problem I gave you, but instead of a square root, it's a cube root. Process would be very similar. First step would be what, do you think? Subtract the 12. Yep, get rid of that plus 12. You don't want that there. You're trying to get the radical by itself before you raise things to certain powers. So I'd subtract 12 from both sides. Then what do you think? Divide by that -5. Get rid of that -5 because you want that radical by itself. You really want that cube root of 8x to be by itself before you start raising both sides to a power. So that'll give me the cube root of 8x equals 4. And I divide both sides by -5. Now what do you think we do to both sides? Raise it to the third power or cube it, right? Okay. So I'm going to raise both sides to the third power. When I cube a cube root, all that would be left is what? The 8x. Yep, the inside of the radical, whatever is underneath that radical symbol, okay? So now I have 8x equals 64, x equals 8. Questions or thoughts on that type of problem? I think you kind of got the hang of these when there's only one radical symbol, okay? Feeling pretty good about where you guys are at with this, okay? Any questions on it? All right, I'm going to pause for me right now because my next problem is going to take a little